They expected him to answer. The room felt heavy with waiting. Words had been thrown toward him, sharp and certain. They were not whispers. They were not gentle. They were meant to stir him, to pull something out of him. A defense, an explanation, perhaps even anger. It would have been easy to respond. A single sentence could have shifted the air. A raised voice could have proved he was not small. A quick reply could have protected his pride. For a brief moment, he felt the familiar heat rise within his chest. The pulse quickened. The mind began forming arguments, lining them up neatly, ready to be released. Have you ever felt that moment? That small fire that asks to be fed? He felt it too. Silence, at first, felt uncomfortable, almost unnatural. The pause stretched longer than anyone expected. Eyes remained fixed on him, waiting, measuring, judging. They thought the delay meant he was searching for words, or perhaps surrendering to them. But something else was happening. Inside, he was watching. He noticed how quickly the body wants to react, how pride trembles when touched, how the heart tries to defend itself before it is truly wounded. He observed the urge to prove, the need to correct, the desire to be seen as right. And in that quiet observation, the heat began to cool. He realized something simple. Not every moment requires his voice. Not every accusation demands his energy. Some words lose their power when they are not met with resistance. They grew restless in his silence. A few shifted in their seats. The air that had once felt heavy with attack slowly became uncertain. It is strange how quiet can change the shape of a room. He did not lower his eyes. He did not show anger. He simply remained still. To remain still is harder than it seems. It feels like standing in the wind without stepping back. It feels like holding a fragile cup without tightening your grip. The mind whispers, say something. Protect yourself. Don't let them think this of you. But what if their thoughts are not yours to control? He asked himself this gently. If he spoke now, would it truly change their minds? Or would it only satisfy the burning in his chest? Would he be speaking from clarity? Or from wounded pride? The silence became his teacher in that moment. He felt his breath slow. He felt the space between his thoughts widen. The words that once seemed urgent began to fade, as if they had never been as important as they claimed. They mistook his quiet for weakness. He could see it in their faces, a subtle confidence, as if they had already won something. But what had they won? Reaction is easy. It is instinct. It is immediate. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can defend themselves with noise. Restraint is different. Restraint asks for strength that is invisible. He did not remain silent because he had nothing to say. He remained silent because he was learning the weight of his own words. He was learning that speech, once released, cannot be gathered back. That anger, once expressed, leaves a trace in the heart. And so he chose the harder path. He allowed the moment to pass without feeding it. He let their words fall to the ground, untouched. He let the fire die on its own. In that stillness, he felt something unexpected, not defeat, not shame, but a quiet steadiness, as if he had stepped aside from a storm and discovered that he did not have to stand in the rain at all. The silence did not make him smaller. It made him aware of how much energy he had saved, aware of how strong he felt without proving anything, aware that sometimes the greatest response is simply not to respond. And in that moment, though no one else could see it, something within him became firm. They had expected noise. He offered calm, and in that calm, a different kind of power began to grow. After that day, they began to look at him differently. It was subtle at first, a glance that lingered a little too long. A quiet exchange between them when he entered the room. Their voices carried. A tone that felt almost certain, as if they had decided something about him. They believed his silence meant he had no answer. They believed his calm meant he did not understand. They believed his restraint meant he was afraid. It is easy to draw conclusions about a quiet person. And though he did not show it, he felt the weight of those conclusions. It pressed gently against his chest, not enough to break him, but enough to be noticed. Have you ever been misunderstood without being asked a single question? There is a loneliness in that, a quiet ache, to know your reasons are deep and thoughtful, and yet to see others reduce them to something small. He could have corrected them. He could have explained that silence is not emptiness, that stillness is not confusion, that calm does not come from fear. The words were there, waiting, but he asked himself again, softly, would they truly listen? When people have already decided who you are, explanation can feel like shouting into the wind. The more you speak, the more they hold to their version of you. Sometimes defending yourself only strengthens their doubt. So he watched. He watched how quickly they grew comfortable with their story about him, how easily they filled the silence with their own meaning. It fascinated him, in a quiet way. How much of what we believe about others is built from our own imagination? He felt moments of discomfort. Let us not pretend he did not. There were evenings when the memory of their looks returned to him, when he wondered if perhaps he should have spoken, after all. If perhaps silence had cost him something. Being misunderstood touches a tender place in the heart. It makes you question yourself. It whispers, maybe they are right. But when he sat with that whisper, he noticed something. The discomfort did not come from their judgment. It came from his desire to be seen correctly. And why did he need that so deeply? Was his worth tied to their understanding? Was his peace dependent on their approval? These were not easy questions. They lingered with him in the quiet hours. Slowly he began to see that their misunderstanding did not change his truth. It did not erase his thoughts. It did not weaken his reasons. It only existed in their minds. And he could not live inside their minds. There is a strange freedom in accepting that some people will never see you clearly. Not because you have failed to show yourself, but because they are looking through their own lens. He realized that explaining himself endlessly would become a kind of begging, a quiet request to be validated. And he did not wish to beg for understanding. He wished to remain steady. They may have thought he was weak. They may have believed he lacked courage. They may have told themselves that his silence was surrender. But inside, he knew something they did not. Restraint requires awareness. Silence requires strength. To remain calm while being misjudged is not an absence of power. It is a deeper form of it. The sting of being misunderstood did not disappear overnight. It softened slowly, like a bruise fading with time. Each day he chose not to react. The ache grew lighter. He began to see their judgments as passing weather, clouds that drifted across the sky of his life. Some days they were heavy, some days they were thin. But none of them stayed forever, and beneath those clouds, the sky remained unchanged. He did not need to chase every cloud away. He did not need to argue with the wind. He only needed to know who he was when no one was looking. In that quiet knowing, something within him settled. They could misunderstand him. He would understand himself. There is a kind of discipline that no one applauds. It does not shine. It does not announce itself. It happens quietly in the small space between feeling and action. Each time they spoke in ways that tested him, he felt the familiar movement inside, the mind preparing its defense, the heart tightening, the old habit of reaction standing at the door, ready to step forward. But now he recognized that moment. He began to see it as a crossroad. On one side, the quick relief of speaking. On the there, the slower path of holding back. One path promised satisfaction. The other promised understanding. Which one truly led to strength? He would pause, just for a breath, sometimes only for a heartbeat. But in that pause, he found choice. It is strange how powerful a single breath can be. Within that small space, he could observe himself. He could see how pride rises quickly, almost instinctively, how the ego dislikes being touched, how it whispers that silence means defeat. Yet he asked himself, gently, defeat in whose eyes? If he reacted every time he felt slighted, would he not be handing his peace to them? Would he not be allowing their words to guide his emotions, like strings guiding a puppet? He did not want to be moved so easily. And so the discipline grew. At first, it felt heavy, like holding a weight that strained the muscles. Each unspoken reply felt like effort. Each calm expression required intention. There were moments when he walked away and felt the leftover energy still burning inside him. He did not pretend the fire was not there. He simply chose not to spread it. Over time, something shifted. The weight began to feel lighter. The pause became more natural. The need to answer every challenge slowly lost its urgency. He started to notice that many words thrown at him dissolved on their own when left untouched. It was as if he had been carrying ones that were never his to carry. Restraint is not silence out of fear. It is silence chosen with awareness. It is knowing you could speak and deciding not to. There is quiet dignity in that. He realized that power does not always look like force. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like a deep lake that does not ripple at every passing breeze. The surface may be calm, but beneath it lies depth. They could not see that depth. They only saw the surface. But he was no longer trying to prove what lay beneath. Each moment of restraint strengthened something invisible inside him. A quiet center, a place that did not depend on praise or agreement, a place that did not tremble when questioned. Have you ever noticed how exhausting constant reaction can be? How it keeps the mind restless and the heart unsettled? He began to feel less tired. By not engaging in every conflict, he saved his energy. By not chasing every misunderstanding, he kept his clarity. His thoughts became slower, steadier. His emotions less sharp, more measured. He discovered that the greatest battle was never with them. It was within himself. The impulse to defend, the urge to correct, the craving to be validated. These were the true forces asking for his attention. And each time he chose restraint, he gently mastered one more part of himself. No one congratulated him for this. No one even noticed. But he noticed. He felt the growing stability in his chest. He felt the quiet confidence that came from knowing he was no longer controlled by every outside voice. He felt a sense of ownership over his reactions. That ownership became his strength. Not loud strength, but the kind that allows a person to stand in the middle of noise and remain unmoved. And slowly, without announcing it, he began to understand that mastering the impulse to react was not about them at all. It was about becoming whole within himself. Over time, the room changed, though no one would have admitted it. The noise of expectation slowly lost its weight. The sharpness of judgment dulled into something softer, almost ordinary. Yet he remained as he had been, quiet, steady, untouched by the small storms around him. He felt the difference, not in how they saw him, but in how he felt within himself. There was a stillness that had settled in his chest, a quiet warmth that had nothing to prove. He could sit and breathe without the constant pull to react. He could look at the world and not feel small, even when others misjudged him. Have you ever noticed the calm that comes after long effort, when the struggle is no longer about winning, but about simply being? It is quiet. It is soft, and yet it carries a depth that no noise can reach. He understood now that peace is not something it is something gathered quietly, piece by piece, inside the mind and heart. It is built not in moments of applause, but in the silence that follows every impulse to prove oneself. He had walked that road, the harder one, and learned that his own company, his own steady presence, was enough. They continued to speak, to guess, to assume, but he no longer needed to follow their maps. Their words were like wind passing over a pond. The surface rippled, but the depth beneath remained undisturbed. He had become the depth beneath the surface. It was strange at first to feel so much strength without showing it. The body tends to crave visible proof. The mind seeks acknowledgement. And yet, he discovered that true strength is invisible, not in making others see, but in knowing oneself. Sometimes, when the memory of their earlier impatience returned, he would smile softly, as if to say thank you for giving him the chance to grow. It was not triumph. It was recognition. Recognition that the path he chose, the road of stillness, had not been empty. It had led somewhere quietly meaningful. The moments of tension that once pressed against him were no longer threats. They were lessons. They had shown him what it meant to hold himself steady, to allow others to speak while he remained rooted, to let the world shape itself around him without shaking his center. And in that rooting, he discovered a new rhythm to life. It was not hurried. It did not chase results. It was measured, reflective, aware of each breath, each movement, each thought. The silence that had once felt heavy now felt like a companion, a gentle presence that reminded him of his own strength. He began to notice that the world moved with less urgency when he did not chase it. Conversations passed like clouds, but he did not need to capture them. Opinions drifted like wind, but he did not need to hold them. He had learned that what matters is not what they think, but how he moves through himself. And in that quiet, he understood the subtle truth. To remain unmoved is not to withdraw. It is to rise quietly, invisibly, in the knowledge that nothing outside him can diminish the calm he has claimed. He walked slowly, not to be seen, not to impress, but because his steps were measured by the rhythm he had found inside. There was a lightness to it, a freedom from tension, a soft confidence that did not call attention. Have you felt what it is like to stand without trembling, even when others doubt or misjudge, to hold your place with no one watching, to know deep in your chest that silence can be louder than words? He had discovered that answer. It was not a loud answer. It was not celebrated. It did not shout a victory. It was a still, enduring strength, a calm that remained when the room fell quiet. A knowing that he had chosen the harder road, walked it carefully, and arrived at a place of steady, gentle power. And in that calm he rested, fully, quietly, as if he had always belonged there. As if nothing outside could touch the center he had quietly built, as if silence itself had become the most eloquent part of him.